I'm Eva Valora. Like many women in the escort industry, I use a different name. A small but preferred boundary between my professional and personal life. The name was chosen deliberately, from the Latin root for value and courage. Both matter in this work. As a 9-year-old, I was laying in bed, dreaming about becoming a call girl. I never forget how excited I was when I finally turned 18 and was legally allowed to begin. A sense that life was finally opening. The choice was mine, and it had been made long before. I entered curious, determined, willing to meet the reality of this work at every level. I started out in shabby brothels, in private houses, and in the famous red light district of Amsterdam. I learned what it means to work in environments where the volume is high, the margins are thin, and the physical labor constant. As the years passed, I became more selective, more strategic, more aware of what suited my nature. Eventually, I moved into the world of high-end escorting, where appearances are polished, discretion is expected, and the psychological demands are more subtle and far more intense. Presence became performance. Emotional intelligence became currency. Reading people became the foundation of everything. Few paths force maturity as quickly as living inside contradiction. Of being someone's most intimate companion by appointment. Of being fully present, yet permanently invisible. But the most important difference was not what that world asked of me. It was what that asking did to me. Over time, invisibly, inside. For more than a decade, I lived what most people would consider an impossible combination. A student and young professional by day, full-time escort by night. I completed my Master of Science. I built a professional life. I moved between worlds that could not know each other. And I kept each one whole. Nobody knew. The cost of that was real. Constant compartmentalization, hypervigilance, carrying shame and stigma in silence, while continuing to perform at a high level. The fatigue of living two full-time identities that could never meet, and still showing up every single day, every single night. I carried it alone. And while I was living that double life, in the discipline, the silence, the extraordinary cognitive, emotional and physical labor of it, I was also watching, noticing. Something was happening inside me that I had no framework for yet. Not damage, not decline. Something more complex and more interesting than either of those words. Something was shifting in how I understood myself, in how I related to others, in how I inhabited my own body and my own identity over time. I had nowhere to bring that observation. No professional who truly understood the terrain. No clinical framework that took the psychological reality of this work seriously, on its own terms, without judgment, without agenda. That absence stayed with me. Without fully knowing it, I was being prepared for the work I would later create. When I trained as a psychologist, I walked into a clinical world that had almost nothing useful to offer me or the women I worked beside. There was almost no serious psychological understanding of women working in high-end escorting. What existed was shallow, sensationalized, built by outsiders. I knew that neither the victim narrative nor the empowerment narrative came close to capturing the actual psychological complexity of this work. The truth was more nuanced, more interesting, and more important than either story allowed. The women doing this work, intelligent, capable, highly functional women, navigating one of the most psychologically demanding professional environments that exists, deserved something real. Not rescue, not judgment, not a theoretical map drawn by people who never lived it, but a professional space where what was actually happening inside them could finally be named, understood, and integrated. Nothing like that existed. No explanation for how secrecy doesn't just hide the work, but how it slowly reshapes who you are. No explanation for how adaptation can feel like strength, while quietly carrying cost. No explanation for how the work stays on your skin long after the last client left. If no one had built a framework grounded in truth and lived reality, then someone who understood both worlds had to do it. That became Psychology for Escorts. Not a scandalous project, not a political statement, not an attempt to glorify or condemn. A serious psychological framework built for women who deserve more than ignorance or assumptions about what happens inside them. I speak two languages that very few people can combine. The private language of escorts, the unspoken rules, the emotional realities, the silent costs, and the invisible transformations of this work. And the language of psychology, adaptation, formation, regulation, the architecture of how people change. I do not speak about escorts from the outside. I do not speak about psychology without reality. I stand at the intersection of both. A decade of lived experience that no textbook contains. That perspective cannot be bought, studied, or constructed. It can only be lived. The Psychology for Escorts Framework is the first clinical framework designed specifically for the psychological realities of high-end escort work. My work exists for one reason. Because intelligent, capable, highly functional women are navigating one of the most psychologically demanding environments that exist. And most of them never had a place to bring what it does to them. I want to change that. Not with rescue, not with judgment, but with clarity, with precision, with respect. I want women to understand not only what they move through, but what it does to them, and how to carry that forward with intelligence, with dignity, and with agency. I'm Eva Valora, creator of the Psychology for Escorts Framework, founder of Psychologist for Escorts. A woman who stepped out of secrecy to make the inner world of this work psychologically understandable at last.